Hello, welcome back. We're going to continue our lectures on Japan. This lecture is for 8.2, Art and Culture in Heian. The essential question is, what types of art and culture were part of the Heian period? So for 8.2 vocabulary, there are only 4 terms. Court. Now be very careful, like I said before, you do not look these up on Google because court has very wide variety of definitions. So you do want to make sure you're talking about the court specific to Japan and what that word means. So it's not like a tennis court or a basketball court. It means something completely different. Lady Murasaki Shikubu. Pure Land Buddhism, not the same as Buddhism as we've known before, and Zen. So Japanese nobles create great art. So nobles are higher ranking than peasants and merchants and farmers. So these are the people that would live in the cities and be more higher status. So that's what nobles are. Nobles will follow the emperors and empresses to new cities. So they would travel with emperors and empresses. That's part of being part of the court. You would actually follow them around. In 794, they moved to Heian, now called Kyoto. Heian became an epicenter of art and culture during this period. So it is very similar to Constantinople, Timbuktu. These are Xinjiang in China. So these were the epicenters, the large cities where they would have a lot of art, education, culture, museums, temples. So this is where that hub of culture would be. The nobles that would remain close to their leader were called the court, so they would follow their emperors and empresses around. The nobles would lead very luxurious lives. They would wear very expensive clothes, have chefs that would live with them, and people like servants that would live with them that would take care of the household, take care of their children, cook them food. They called themselves the dweller among the clouds, meaning that they kind of floated above everybody else because they were of a higher status. But not only that, they would often see their lives in a very dreamlike state, that nothing could go wrong. So they were dwellers among the clouds, almost like their heads were in the clouds. They weren't really seeing life for what it really was. They were only seeing the beauty and the luxuriousness that was their life. The court was great supporters of the arts. So they would hire artists to come in and paint their furniture, to paint murals for them, to paint portraits of them. And from 794 to 1185, this was considered the golden age of arts in Japan. And you'll see a variety of different arts that are going to be developed during this time period. One of those art, let me bring these up. There we go. One type of art is fashion. So fashion is considered art. Love of beauty was held very highly among the nobles, and it started with their appearance. You could tell they were nobles specifically by what they wore, how they wore their hair, how they did their makeup. Everything about their appearance would show you that they are a noble, and they like to wear very artistic clothing. Nobles wore very elaborate outfits of silk robes and gold jewelry. Women wore robes that had several layers, and these layers were cut usually in a diamond or a triangle pattern to show the layers underneath as well. So the longest layer would be on the very bottom, shortest layer on the top, and all the layers underneath would all show different colors, different designs, different embroidery. And it was also said, like, the more layers you have, the more money you have, because the silk was very expensive. Fans were carried And they were painted with flowers, trees, and birds. Remember that they honored nature in many different ways. Art is one way that they would honor nature, and they would have beautifully hand painted decorated fans. You can see here a picture of a lady's robes. Like I said, they're cut in triangle patterns, so you will see this pattern quite often. So you're able to see all the layers of silk underneath. And then also what a fan might look like. You can see this one is very ornate and decorated as well. Also using gold. So gold is used a lot in their art as well. For literature, you're going to read page 205 to 206 in your textbook and take notes on your Cornell notes from this section. And then on page 210, there is a short story called The Tale of Genji. It's one of the first pieces of literature from Japan that was that historians had found, and it was by a very famous author. So you'll read The Tale of Genji on page 210 and add some information to your notes from that story. So visual arts, the most popular visual arts were painting, calligraphy, architecture. So by saying visual arts, it's exactly that. It's things that you can see that are often used in daily life. Paintings were bright, bold colors, illustrated stories, a lot of nature, and a lot of court life. So, the life of all the nobles, they liked to, if there was a ceremony or if they wanted to hang a painting in their house, it would often be of themselves doing something that only nobles would do. And then a lot of paintings were actually on pieces of furniture in their home, on doors, rather than on paper because it would last so much longer. Paper at this time, remember that it was developed in China. It was one of the Chinese inventions that we studied. They were still fine tuning how to preserve paper without it being ruined. And because the nobles would move from city to city, they wanted things that were easily movable. And paper was not. Paper, if you rolled it enough times, it would fall apart. It could get damaged in the weather. Things like doors and furniture, they could literally dismantle a door or take a piece of furniture with them, and it would last a lot longer. It's also things they could hand down from generation to generation. Calligraphy was decorative writing. They used this a lot when they were writing poetry. So decorative writing, similar to the title you see here, would be a form of calligraphy. Calligraphy has many different forms, many different fonts. So it's just a beautiful writing. They would actually do this writing with a paintbrush, not the calligraphy that we know now that's with the special pen. It would actually be with a paintbrush and black ink. So here is an example of a painting. So you can see this is court life. This is actually someone in here that's being carried from place to place because these women with these silk robes, because there were so many layers, it was very heavy. So it was very difficult for these ladies to walk. So they would often be carried from place to place. This is an example of a wardrobe. A wardrobe is a place you would keep clothes, and you can see a lot of gold filigree on the edges as well as paintings on the doors. And then this is an example of calligraphy. So very artistic writing of different Japanese characters. Architecture. So architecture is buildings, and there was a building on the very first slide for 8.2 that was an example of a temple. Heian was modeled after Shenzhen, China's capital. So I talked about that a little bit already, where it was an epicenter of education and art and culture, very simple with Heian. They're very ornate buildings and temples. There is going to be a video you're going to watch. It's about 15 minutes long, and she does take you on a tour and shows you many of these gardens and temples, and they are absolutely beautiful. They have wooden frames that curve upwards off of the roofs of the houses, often curve upwards, and end in a thatch roof for a natural feel. So they do bring in nature in their architecture. Very large open spaces inside the buildings. A lot of the ceilings would also be painted as if you were outdoors. So they would have ceilings painted as if they were the sky. Wood was often left unpainted to show natural beauty, so they wanted to see the wood grain in some of the wood, especially outdoors. So when you would see gazebos or what do you call them, in gardens where they have the little roof structures and vines going up the roof and up the sides of the buildings, they would often bring in a lot of natural elements. Many buildings were surrounded by gardens and ponds to add more beauty. So similar to this, you can see this is a lot of natural wood here. The roof is curved upwards, ponds and gardens surrounded it. So they wanted to be surrounded by beauty. So this is in the city. On the outskirts of the city where many of the peasants lived, it wasn't quite as beautiful as this, but the nobles wanted to live in a place where they were surrounded by beauty. They didn't want to see the real world on the outside, so they would surround themselves with gardens so they can admire the beauty that was nature. Performing arts is another type of art and culture that we're going to take a look at on page 207. So we have dance, and you can see again, very, very bright, vivid colors, lots of gold. And then here you can see the makeup, the headdress. So performing arts, dancing, singing, drama theater was very popular in Japan. So, part of the culture that changed was not just the art that was developing, but another cultural change that they had is with the correlation between Shintoism and Buddhism that we studied last week. Buddhism is this new idea, and it wasn't adopted so much by the lower levels of society, but the nobles and royalty did adopt Buddhism as their religion. But throughout time, they did make some changes. They wanted to have very elaborate rituals to celebrate their religion. So, elaborate clothing for the rituals, elaborate art pieces, statues made, things made of gold. So, when they did celebrate this religion, it was very, very elaborate. Common people, so this is like the peasants, they preferred a newer form of Buddhism called Pure Land Buddhism, and it's exactly how it sounds. So it's honoring the land through the religion of Buddhism. So Buddhists would Pure Land Buddhism was often celebrated outside, similar to when they would celebrate Shinto. It would be outside at a Shinto shrine. So they wanted to be outside and find an enlightened state of peace. So one of the things that they would do is they would find a very quiet area, whether it was outdoors somewhere like in a garden, and they would chant Buddha's name over and over as repetition just to find peace and clear their minds. Another idea that was developed during this time is Zen. Zen was believed to neither have good behavior nor faith. Believed neither good behavior or faith led to wisdom, but rather that self-discipline and meditation left to wisdom. So this would often be performed by the men that were in the army. So self-discipline, that makes complete sense. The army is very rigid and make sure that everything is in line. They follow a routine, very, very disciplined. And the meditation part would be them centering their minds and meditating and clearing their minds of all of their other problems so that they could focus on the job at hand, which was protecting the land. So good behavior and faith did not lead to wisdom. They believed that their own self-discipline and being able to meditate and clear their mind is what led to wisdom. Zen was practiced by Japanese warriors, and when the Japanese warriors started doing it and showed how calm and peaceful they could be in combat, other people also started to practice the idea of Pure Land Buddhism and Zen to reach that state of peace of mind, to release their stress, and to be able to focus on their daily tasks. So this is the video I was talking about. The link is on Google Classroom and you'll add to your Cornell notes. This shows so many beautiful pieces from the Heian period. And they'll also walk you through a short tour of the city so that you could see many of the different pieces of architecture and the gardens. And you'll take notes on your Cornell notes for this video as well. Okay. And finally, please don't forget to mark up your notes. Some people are still forgetting to do this. We are 31 weeks into school. We only have 7 weeks left, so you should know better by now. This is half of the points for your Cornell notes. So if you're not underlining keywords or vocabulary, highlighting main ideas, not the topics, the main ideas underneath the topics, and you're not highlighting your whole notes. You're picking out specific things that you want to remember that you think are a big idea. You're going to write one question for each section of notes in the questioning column, and then you are going to write a summary for 2 to 3 sentences that answers our essential question. So you want to make sure you're doing each and every one of these things to get full credit for your Cornell notes. So we have another art project this week, and the art project is to write a poem, because literature is considered an art, and then also you are going to create a fan, a Japanese fan. So you're going to decorate the fan. Remember that when they decorated the fans, it was often used scenes from nature to decorate their fans. They were very ornate, very beautifully decorated, very bright colors. And then what the women would do often is they would have poems written on the backside of the fan, and they would recite their poems as a form of entertainment. So what this is here, you're going to write a poem, and the poem is called a tanka poem, and it does follow this specific syllable scheme. So the first line has to have 5 syllables, second line has 7, third line has 5, fourth line has 7, and fifth line has 7. So you do want to make sure that you are using all of those correctly. I do have an example over here for you on what that would look like. So I will give you the outline of the fan. You're going to write your poem on one side, and you could either decorate that same side of the poem or flip it over and decorate the other side. So here's some examples from past students. So you can see away from my love, that is 5 syllables. The bright moon shines overhead, that's 7. I wait in silence, that's 5. As dark clouds hang over me, 7. Never to see light again, 7. So they used watercolor here and watercolor for their painting. This one here they sketched. They used marker and color pencil here. They even added some Japanese characters to theirs. So you could design it however you want. You could put the poem on one side and the design on the other, or you could put them both on the same side just like these are here. I will give you your fan in class, and then this will be due next week. Sorry about that. This will be due next week, and you'll bring it back to me. So here are some examples of writing. Please, obviously, do not copy these. Make up your own. It could be, usually the poems would be specifically about nature or love, some sort of human emotion usually. So you want to make sure that you do stay on topic, that you're not writing about Fortnite or Xbox or riding your bike. You want to make sure that it is of the theme that these Japanese tanka poems would be. And then just let me know if you have any questions. The Friday activity this week will be the 8.2 assessment review as usual, and I will see you all soon.